Hello everyone, welcome to BioWorks. In my previous session, we covered structure of anatropous ovule and development of female gametophyte. And in today's session, we'll be looking into pollination and its types. Let's get started. So in this section, I'll be dealing with pollination. So in my previous video, we have studied the structure of flower where we saw the various parts of a flower. And if you all remember, stamen is the male part of the flower and carpel or pistil is the female part of a flower. Now what is pollination? Pollination is transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma in a flower. So if I can write that down in short, it is the transfer of pollen from anther to stigma. Now, as we all know, anther is the part of the flower which is present in the stamen, the male part of the flower, and stigma is the part of pistil, which is the female part of the flower. So, during pollination, the pollen grains are transferred from the male to the female part, and you can say pollination is a prerequisite for fertilization because without pollination, fertilization cannot take place. All right. Now, we will go into details about the different types of pollination based on the source of pollen grains. Right. Now, I have shown two diagrams over here. You can see diagram A and B where I've shown two different plants. Now, I'm going to explain the three kinds of pollination in the diagram. So, let us assume that the pollen grains are getting transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of the same flower, right? In this case, it is called as autogamy, right? Autogamy. So, auto means self, gamy means fusion. So, what is happening is pollen grains are getting transferred from anther to the stigma of the same flower. So, isn't autogamy same as self-pollination? Yes, it is. All right. That was one type. The second type is when the pollen grains are transferred from anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower but on the same plant. You can see this is the same plant, right? And the pollen grains are getting transferred from anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower but on the same plant. That process is called as Geitonogamy. I'm going to mention that here. Geitonogamy. Alright, so both autogamy and Geitonogamy produce offsprings that are genetically identical because the flowers belong to the same plant. Alright, now the third and the last kind of pollination is called as Xenogamy, and it is transfer of pollen grains from anther of a flower to the stigma of another flower on a different plant, right? You can see this is one plant, this is another plant, and the pollen are getting transferred from one flower of one plant to another flower of a different plant. So in this case, it is called as a Xenogamy. By now, you must have guessed that Xenogamy is nothing but cross-pollination. Yes, it is. So, these are the three types of pollination based on the source of pollen grains. Now, let us now look into autogamy a bit detail. Right. Now, in autogamy, the flower can be either Chasmogamous. I'll mention that here. The flower can be either Chasmogamous or the flowers can be Cleistogamous. I'm going to explain the meaning of that. Right. Now, Chasmogamous means flowers that are open and the reproductive parts are well exposed. Whereas Cleistogamous flowers are those that do not open at all. Okay, so in autogamy, the flowers may be either Chasmogamous or they may be Cleistogamous. Can you guess which of the flowers, in which of these flowers, autogamy is a sure method? You are correct. In Cleistogamous flowers, autogamy or self-pollination is a sure method. Why? Because flowers do not open at all. And if they do not open, pollen from another flower cannot land into this flower, right? So Cleistogamous is a sure method and it will favor autogamy. Alright, there is one more condition that can favor autogamy or self-pollination, and that is called as homogamy. Let me mention that here. Homogamy. And what is homogamy? Homo means same. So homogamy is a condition where the anther and the stigma matures at the same time, right? So in other words, you can say that anther becomes mature and the stigma becomes receptive at the same time. And this is very, very important for self-pollination to take place. If they do not mature at the same time, self-pollination will not be achieved, right? So homogamy and you can say bisexuality is one condition that always favor autogamy or self-pollination. All right, that was all about pollination and its types. In the next video, we will go into details about the agents of pollination. So I hope you found this video helpful. If yes, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.